Hello, biologists. Welcome to class. Today we're going to talk about hormones. We have little Parker over here joining us. And as I was writing this lecture, I was wondering, do squirrels have periods? Do all female mammals with placentas, do they menstruate? So take a moment, think about that to yourself, and I'm going to answer it right now. Turns out that no, most mammals that have a placenta do not menstruate. They instead experience a estrus cycle. And in an estrus cycle, the endometrium is reabsorbed instead of shed. In a menstrual cycle, like humans have, the endometrium swells and increases and gets full of capillaries and blood vessels. And when it doesn't have a zygote implant into it, so when you're not getting pregnant, it's like, what do I do with all this? And it just sloughs it off and sheds it. And that is the menstrual cycle. So squirrels don't have to deal with that. So who is doing the menstruation if squirrels aren't doing it? And the answer is us, humans. We menstruate. 4 species of great apes and 2 lesser apes and 3 old world monkeys. So what is that? 10 organisms so far out of all the mammals, and we're all pretty closely related there. So is there anyone else that menstruates? And the answer is yes, and it's kind of surprising. We have 4 bats that menstruate. Out of 1,400 species, 4 of them have a menstrual cycle like humans do. And elephant shrews. This is the elephant shrew right here, named elephant shrew because of its beautiful trunk-like nose. It also menstruates. And then the Cairo spiny mouse, and that's it. Of all the mammals, only that handful of us have to deal with the menstrual cycle. And while I was thinking about this, I was also like, wait, I know dogs can bleed. Is that menstruation? And so the answer is no, it's not technically a menstrual cycle. Instead, dogs have a heat cycle, meaning that there is a period of time in which they are more likely to get pregnant and more interested in breeding. And during one of those 4 chunks of time during the heat cycle, there's the proestrus cycle. And that part of it may be accompanied with some bloody discharge, but it's not the lining of the endometrium. So it's technically not a menstrual cycle. You could buy your proestruoso dog some really cute little pads if you'd like. So there's a couple of companies that do this. Anyway, our point today is to talk about hormones. We're going to get back to the menstrual cycle really soon. But first, what is a hormone? Hormones are regulatory chemicals that are produced by many parts of your body, some in your brain, some in your organs, like your adrenal glands or your liver, and they are just pushed into your bloodstream. Now, because they're pushed into your bloodstream, they go everywhere in your body. However, only certain cells react to them because they need a receptor to see that hormone. So it's everywhere in your body, but only certain parts of your body will be able to read it. If they don't have the receptor to that hormone, they won't respond to that hormone and it'll just bypass them. This is cool because it gives these hormones, even though they're in your entire bloodstream, specificity. So I could have a hormone that interacts just with my ovaries or just with my kidneys, and it's nice to be able to target, but it's going to be all throughout your blood system. When we say endocrine, what we mean are the tissues and organs associated with producing hormones. So your endocrine system is involved in creating and responding to these things. I've got 2 examples here, epinephrine, which we'll talk about in a second, and growth hormone, which shockingly promotes growth. When you are in puberty, your body goes through a lot of changes. And one of the main changes is that your hypothalamus, which is a part of your brain, starts releasing gonadotropin releasing hormone. So think gonad. Gonadotropin releasing hormone is going to stimulate your pituitary gland. And your pituitary gland is going to increase making 2 hormones that are going to produce a sexually mature body instead of a juvenile body. Those 2 hormones are follicle stimulating hormone. A follicle is a part that's going to produce your gametes. and luteinizing hormone. Both of those are involved in making your gonads produce sex cells. So until puberty or sexually immature, when these two hormones rise, your gonads start producing these hormones and they become sexually mature. You start making viable sperm and you start making or releasing your eggs. You already have all your eggs. They're produced in utero, but they're not mature until you start hitting puberty, and then you release one every 28 days in the hope of it becoming fertilized. Gonadotropin releasing hormone is also a negative feedback loop. So if there's too much of it, it releases less. If there's not enough of it, it releases more. Remember, a negative feedback loop is going to negate the original stimulus. So if the original stimulus is, I don't have enough hormone, you'll make more. If the original stimulus is, I have too much hormone, you make less. Those negative feedback loops are the most common feedback loops to maintain homeostasis in your body. And then I think about puberty and I think about Tina Belcher. So I had to include little Tina Belcher. Once you are sexually mature, you still regulate your body using these hormones. Your follicle stimulating hormone is going to produce gamete production. So in males, this is going to be done in the testes. Our testes are gonads. Luteinizing hormone gets your gonads to start producing the hormones it needs to make sperm. In the testes, this is testosterone. So testosterone is going to help control the release of sperm. Testosterone is also involved during puberty with producing those secondary sex characteristics that we think of as male. So a deeper voice, body hair, more muscle mass, facial hair, enlarging of the penis, enlarging of the testes, all those things that we think of as like maleness, those are controlled by testosterone as well. It's interesting that our book doesn't talk about it as much, but you make estrogen too as a male, and females make testosterone as well. So it's not either or. Everyone is making both, just in different concentrations. So a higher testosterone rate is associated with more male characteristics and the development of sperm in the testes. So all of this is going to be controlled by another regulating hormone called inhibin. So inhibin is going to inhibit the release of testosterone from the testes by controlling how much luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone there is. Your hypothalamus is also paying attention to your testosterone levels. So if your testosterone levels get too high, it releases less of the gonadotropin releasing hormone, which releases less of the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, which decreases your testosterone level. But it's like a balancing beam, right? So it's going to increase and decrease periodically. And we're going to try and keep your body at a homeostatic level so that you can constantly produce healthy sperm, because that is the goal of our reproductive system. In females, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. So follicle stimulating hormone is still involved in making gametes. Gametes in females are eggs. And please forgive the binary here. I know that there's way more than just female and male, and none of this has to do with gender, but we're going to work just on producing these sex cells. Luteinizing hormone is going to stimulate the release of hormones in the gonads. In this case, the gonads are going to be the ovaries. The ovaries themselves, when they're activated, they're going to release estrogens, such as estradiol. That's one that's in a lot of birth controls. And it's going to release progesterones, such as progesterone, which is also in a lot of birth controls. Regulating those two things can change your endometrium thickness, which could make it easier or harder for a fertilized egg to implant. That's how birth control works. You also are going to create activins, which are going to upregulate your whole system and have you produce more hormone, or inhibins, which are going to inhibit the system and downregulate it. Your hypothalamus is also paying attention to the levels of estrogen and progesterones you have in your bloodstream, and it will counteract appropriately so that you can maintain constant but spiking, because every 28 days you're going to have a menstrual cycle, but a cyclical amount of these hormones so that you can stay fertile, because that's our goal in reproductive systems. So what is going on with the menstrual cycle? Let's talk about it. This is our menstrual cycle here. In our menstrual cycle, we have two things to discuss. First is whether or not you are releasing an egg. That is related to the luteal phase and the follicular phase. We're not going to get into it in major detail right now. We will later, but for right now, we're going to kind of gloss over that. But note that this is also associated with egg release. Then we have our graph of pituitary and ovarian hormone levels. So the green is follicle stimulating hormone. The yellow is estrogen. The red is luteinizing hormone. And the blue is progesterone. We have two bars. This bar right here is menstruation, and this bar is ovulation. Ovulation is when you release an egg and it can be fertilized. It's your most likely chance to get pregnant. Menstruation is when your endometrium is being shed. So here at the base, we have the endometrial cycle. If we start at 0, that is during your period. So 0 is your endometrium is sloughing off. That's what it's showing with these little chunks falling off. It's coming out your uterus through the cervix, out the vagina. You're bleeding, there's cramping, it's a thing. So this is your menstrual cycle. Then after you're done menstruating, your endometrium is pretty thick. It's not being elongated. This would be hard for something to implant into. Then you release an egg that is possibly able to get fertilized. If it is fertilized, we want to implant it into our uterus so we can start developing it. And so as your uterus goes, the inner layer, the inner endometrium, is going to get thicker, it's going to get more capillaries, it's growing, it's making like a happy home for that zygote. And if the zygote never comes, if you do not have a fertilized egg, then you slough it all off and you start to menstruate again. Note that our follicle stimulating hormone and our luteinizing hormones are two hormones associated with gamete release. They spike at ovulation. So does estrogen, but estrogen also spikes right before you start bleeding, and your progesterone starts spiking right before you start bleeding. So the excretory system is what you're excreting. In this case, we're going to be thinking about water. Your body maintains water by using antidiuretic hormone. You may have heard that coffee is a diuretic, or alcohol is a diuretic, caffeine is a diuretic. And what that means is it makes you more likely to urinate. And so an antidiuretic hormone would make you less likely to urinate. How does this work? If your blood levels of water start to fall, you do not have enough concentration of blood, then you are going to release antidiuretic hormone. The antidiuretic hormone tells your kidneys to reabsorb more water. That's going to increase your blood concentration, your blood pressure. And as you increase your blood pressure, you're going to then tell your brain that, okay, now I have a little bit too much. And so you will start to release less antidiuretic hormone, and your kidneys will reabsorb less water. And that means that you'll produce more urine. And so you'll lose water, and then the whole cycle starts again. So too much water, you're going to release it. Too little water, you're going to keep it. All that by antidiuretic hormone. This is done with these things called osmoreceptors. They're literally pressure receptors in your arteries. You have a couple of here in your neck. They're really cool. They feel the stretch of your arterial wall, and that's how you know whether or not your blood pressure is too high or too low. We're also going to maintain our level of electrolytes, specifically potassium. Saw the K and started saying calcium. Potassium and sodium. So potassium and sodium are really important to maintaining body function. Your body will be maintaining a level of them by releasing aldosterone. So aldosterone is going to be our key hormone here. It's produced by the renal cortex, so in your little kidneys, and it's going to be released into your bloodstream. And what's going to happen is your kidneys are going to respond if there is too much potassium, you're going to release it. If there's not enough, you're going to keep it. If there's too little sodium, you're going to keep it. If there's too much, you're going to release it. So we're doing that negative feedback loop. What's our key here? We're going to maintain our electrolyte balance with aldosterone, and it's going to regulate our kidneys, whether or not it's absorbing or releasing those ions. We also manage our entire kidney system with a series of reactions that starts with this hormone called angiotensin. So angiotensin is produced in the liver, and it is activated by another, I believe this is a protein called rentin. Rentin is produced in the kidneys. And when angiotensin reacts with rentin, it produces angiotensin 1, which then triggers the release of angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 helps us create aldosterone, which is that reabsorption of our ions, and ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which is the reabsorption of water. Both of these are going to help us maintain an appropriate level of blood pressure, because we need enough blood pressure for everything to be working within our body. So we have a whole lot of hormones interacting with each other. What's our ultimate thing to know here? We got a homeostatic feedback loop. We have different hormones that are regulating our system, and our goal is to maintain a set internal balance so that our body is consistently functioning. Remember, loss of homeostasis is the cause of all death. So we want to maintain homeostasis. We want to maintain our ion and our water levels, angiotensin and rentin being the two hormones that help us control our water regulation and our electrolyte regulation systems. Now we get into metabolism. We have glucagon and insulin that are going to help us regulate our glucose levels. So insulin is going to promote the uptake of glucose, and glucagon is going to promote the storage of glucose. If I ate something sugary, like I had a Coca-Cola, my blood sugar levels would rise. My pancreas would produce insulin. Insulin is going to have my cells take up glucose. And we know this is using those GLUT4 transporters that we talked about last term when we talked about metabolism on a cellular level. That glucose would be used by my mitochondria. I would do cellular respiration, a beautiful process. But I need to tell my body to take up that glucose before I can do anything with it. The hormone that does that is insulin. So I'm going to take up the glucose. If I have excess, my body's going to store it as a molecule called glycogen. And when I'm taking it up from my blood, that means that the blood levels of glucose fall. So this could be like I haven't eaten in a couple of hours. My blood glucose level is getting a little low. My body wants to keep it relatively constant within a range. That's the negative feedback loop part of this. So I know I have stored glucose. I need to release it. To release it, I'm going to use the hormone glucagon that's produced by the pancreas. Glucagon is going to tell my liver to start breaking down glycogen, and glycogen is going to get released back into the bloodstream. And now my blood levels are going to rise. So I'll release insulin, and then I'll store it, and then I'll need it. So I'll release glucagon and I'll release it. And it's this wonderful loop where you try to keep your blood levels of glucose constant, even though you're not eating constantly, right? Like this is a balance because we only eat once every couple of hours. We also maintain metabolism with our thyroid hormones. So thyroid hormones control your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories you need to keep your body going at rest. So as I'm sitting here, I'm using my brain, my heart is pumping, my intestines are squeezing, I'm using muscles to keep myself upright, posture, all of that takes energy. And so your basal metabolic rate is set by your thyroid hormones. We have two that we really talk about. They're these wonderful words. Go ahead and pronounce these to yourself. We call them T3 and T4. So they are made in your thyroid. We're also going to talk about calcitonin, which is involved in calcium, but we're going to do that in the next couple slides. And we're going to regulate our thyroid with thyroid stimulating hormone and then a releasing hormone. So all of this together. If your thyroid is extra active, we call it hyperthyroidism. If your thyroid is below level active, it's called hypothyroidism. So hypothyroidism is a low metabolic rate, where hyperthyroidism is a high metabolic rate. Take a moment and check out these symptoms. It's interesting because they're kind of opposites, right? Like increased sweating, decreased sweating, constipation, diarrhea. Both of these have common symptoms like fatigue, insomnia, and hair loss, but there's different things. One of the bulging eye symptoms is really interesting. If you're worried about your thyroid level, you can get that tested with a regular blood panel. Now we get to talk about calcitonin. So your blood calcium level is regulated by parathyroid glands. Your parathyroid gland is going to release parathyroid hormone. By the way, the parathyroid glands are little pieces inside the thyroid. So it's not the thyroid itself, it's right next to them, in them. So para being beside. And these parathyroid hormones are going to stimulate the release of calcium. So we're going to release calcium from the bones. We're going to maintain calcium in our kidneys. So we're going to keep it instead of releasing it. We're going to activate our intestines to absorb more calcium. So this is going to increase your calcium levels. If your calcium levels get too high, we have an antagonist in calcitonin. Calcitonin is going to do basically the opposite, and it's produced by the thyroid. So if I release parathyroid hormones in my bones, I'm going to activate these cells called osteoclasts. Osteoclasts are going to break open bone tissue, and bone tissue contains a lot of calcium. That calcium will go into my bloodstream. So I'm making my bones have little tiny holes in them from these cells called osteoclasts. When I release calcitonin, I'm going to build that back up. I'm going to have osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are going to start to rebuild that tissue, and my bones are going to get stronger. There's a lot more going on with bone remodeling, but we do this constantly because calcium is stored in our bones. So we constantly break and use the calcium from our bones. You actually remodel your entire skeleton every 10 years completely. So we think of bone as being static and hard and kind of like dead, but it's not. When it's in your body, it is full of blood, full of cells. It is rich, it is living, it is doing things. So we're constantly reworking all of our bones, and a lot of it is hormonally controlled. All right. That brings us to growth. So we control growth with growth hormone. That's really nicely named. When you release growth hormone, you're going to stimulate overall body growth by using mitosis. You're going to be making more cells. You're going to be growing so quickly that your cells start to regenerate more quickly. You're going to start storing more adipose because that's energy for later. Your muscles are going to get bigger. Your bones are going to get denser. You're going to be releasing sugars because you need all that sugar for all this activity that you're doing. And this is also regulated by inhibiting hormones in the hypothalamus. So we go through growth spells, especially during puberty. You're going to be doing a lot of growth hormone release so that you can grow from your adolescent size to your adult size. And our bodies don't stop growing until our 20s-ish. So depending what type of person you are, you could still be growing into your late 20s. Lastly, we're going to talk about stress. So there's short-term stress, which is things like I was walking the other day and I wasn't really paying attention and I came to a curb and I kind of fell off it. That scared me. And so my body flooded itself with epinephrine, which we also call adrenaline, and norepinephrine, which we call noradrenaline. And I got scared and my body got sweaty and my eyes dilated and I felt panicky and my heart was racing and I was breathing heavier. All of that is a short-term stress response. That activated my body's fight or flight response, so my parasympathetic nervous division. When I figured out that I wasn't going to fall and there wasn't a car coming and I was safe, I stopped releasing those hormones and I got over it and I was fine. By the time I crossed the street, I was no longer scared. So that is how your short-term stress response works. It's an immediate danger. You fix it, or you run away, or you fight it, or you realize they're actually fine. And then your body just kind of de-escalates and you return back to normal. In our world, we have long-term stress. So long-term stress is when your adrenal cortex is stimulated by adrenocortical hormones, and those are going to release a type of steroids called corticosteroids. A class of corticosteroids is called glucocorticoids, and in that group we have cortisol. So cortisol is what we refer to as our long-term stress hormone, and long-term stress hormones have a lot of different effects. One is increased blood pressure, decreased sensitivity to pain, increased blood sugar, suppressing your immune system, decreasing your serotonin, and all of these things have an effect on our body. In evolution, it would be nice to have long-term stress, like during things like a hunt or during a time when you're being chased, maybe for a longer period than just for a few seconds. But our bodies were not designed to have long-term stress for days, months, weeks. And unfortunately, we now live in a society where we do have these long-term stressors that last for way longer than we were evolved to. And your body doesn't know the difference. Stress is stress to your body. And so even though these cortisol levels can have short-term benefits, like attention memory and suppressing the immune system to like make things feel less inflamed. That's where cortisone shots come from, by the way, is you're injecting a variety of cortisol. It does have long-term effects that are quite negative. So the long-term effects of prolonged heightened cortisol levels are anxiety, depression, digestion problems, weight gain, headaches, sleep problems, muscle tension and pain, problems with memory and focus, and then most alarmingly, heart disease, heart attack, high blood pressure, stroke. All of those are things that we want to be concerned about. So if you're feeling stress, like deep stress for a long time, there are things that you can do. And this is where we're going to end the lecture today, is how do we try and manage stress? The CDC and the NIH have these examples for you. And I think they're all great. So these are wonderful. If you haven't tried these yet, I highly recommend them. The first one is take care of your body. Eat healthy, so eat real foods, eat whole foods, try to avoid processed foods, try to avoid sugar-sweetened beverages. So even if you drink like coffee, like I do every day, maybe use less sweetened creamers. Try to just give your body a break with things that it's not intended to be eating all the time. Get a lot of exercise. I will encourage you to do weight-bearing exercise. Putting stress on your muscles is really important for your overall health and longevity, especially if you're female. So most females are going to experience periodic periods of anemia because of menstruation. Our bone density is going to decrease. If you are above 30, especially, really important that you're doing weight-bearing exercise. And by weight-bearing exercise, I mean trying to lift heavy things like weights. As a person who loves going to the woods and I love hiking, I love walking around looking at mushrooms, none of that is weight-bearing. So you also have to do weight-bearing exercise. And then prioritize sleep. I know this is hard to do, and statistically, a lot of us are not good sleepers, but maybe even make it a goal this year to like set up your bedroom to be somewhere that is quiet and safe and dark, and try and prioritize it. Sleep is hugely important for overall health and hugely important for managing stress. The next recommendation that the CDC and the NIH make is try and work in relaxation. So deep breathing, meditation, yoga. I love Yoga with Adriene. If you haven't tried Yoga with Adriene yet, I highly recommend it. She's a wonderful yoga teacher. It's on YouTube, so the barriers to participation are quite low. You just have to choose a video that looks fun. She always modifies it, so you don't have to do the really hard things that you don't know how to do. And she doesn't require a lot of equipment. So you might see my little yoga mat behind me. Yoga with Adriene is my favorite. I love it. Another thing that's really important for managing stress is to spend time on your hobbies, whatever they are, listening to music, reading, playing video games, whatever it is. Do something for yourself that is fun. Watch TV, chat with your friends, schedule a phone call. Fostering healthy friendships and being a part of your community is also related to decreased stress. So call the people that you love, text the folks that you love, volunteer in your neighborhood. There's always all sorts of fun volunteer things to do. Like this weekend, I'm volunteering with Friends of Trees in my neighborhood, and we're going to plant trees in our area. So I'll get to meet my neighbors and chit chat. It'll be lovely. And then lastly, seek professional counseling. I think that at this point in our lives, like in society, there's not as much of a taboo around this, and that's great. Therapy is incredible. A counselor is incredible. It's an investment in yourself. And these folks are professionally trained to teach you how to deal with stress and how to manage the things that might be keeping you stuck. So recommend it if it's something that works. I hope that was helpful. Have a lovely day. Email me anytime, and we will chat soon.